Yeah, they said, like, don't go to college, it'll ruin you, and it did. It ruined me to, like, the purity of religion for sure.
Yeah, so those classes, let's talk about some of those things. So the class where you were learning about gay rights, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. I had been at college, I started hearing about this idea that gay people, like, do exist, and there are places in the world where that does happen. I learned about the Stonewall riots during a social practice, like a social work practice class. And I also learned about HIV, which was scary to me to learn about. And what I would do with that information is I would put it into a pre-existing schema that I already had. So the idea I had was being any sort of gay is a sin and you will get punished. Right. And so when I learned about HIV, I was like, and AIDS, I was like, there's the punishment.
Mm.
It just confirmed my pre existing biases because those were so strong. But then there was this class I was in where the professor just, like, without warning, put on this film about gay rights. It was, like, sweet and musical and loving, and I could see women, like, kissing other women and holding hands, and it was like sunshine, rainbow, sparkle kind of film, and I wasn't prepared to see that. I was prepared to learn about the hardships of being gay, and, like, that worked for me, but seeing the joy, like queer joy, trans joy, that felt really threatening to me. And I felt very worried that I would fall back into this, like, kind of sinful path. And so I asked to leave the class so I wouldn't have to see it.
Right.
Just like how strong that brainwashing goes.
Right. And I forget the name of the other Orthodox woman who was there with you. She was
Sick
worried
butt. Yeah.
about your unborn child.
Right. Like, she saw me. So we're sitting in this class and the film is on, and I'm starting to go like this, like cover my face. And she was like, "Psst, like, you're pregnant. You can't be here for this." With this, like, really strong idea that if I watch something and it's impure, like, my child would be impure. The purity culture is so pervasive.
Yeah, that's next level right there.
Yeah.
That what you are watching is going to infect your unborn child. That, yeah, I underlined when I was reading your book. I was like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. That's a lot of pressure for you
It
as a
was.
pregnant woman.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter, who I was pregnant with, she's turning 18 this month, and she's bisexual, and she always says, "It's because you walked out in the middle of the film." She's like, "Mom, if you would have just stayed to the end, who knows?"
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I love that humor. Okay, so is there anything else, any other defining moments at college that really piqued your interest in the outside world or got you thinking more critically?
I think there was, like, a moment when I learned that marital rape like, the term marital rape, that was really scary for me to learn because it was like, "Wait, I didn't know that could happen within the context of a marriage."
Mm.
And I started to think about all the times my husband, he would come home at the end of his night of learning, and I would be on the couch trying not to look up, reading one of the limited Jewish magazines I was allowed to read. So I'd be just, like, pretending to be engrossed in the magazine I had already read 50 times. And I didn't want him to ask for sex because I believed that the moment he asked, it was my duty to provide.
Mhm.
So I thought, like, if I read this hard enough, he'll just walk by me. But every night when the doorknob rattled, I would get so scared and frozen. And he would come in, and again, he was a gentle guy, right? Like, it's just that that's what I thought the rule was, that I couldn't say no. And he would say in this Hebrew word tashmish, which is like Hebrew for, do you want, like, sex? And I would have to put the magazine down. It's what I believed I had to do, and follow him to the bedroom and lie there while he, on some level, like, just I don't know, I don't want to say like rape, but it was a little rapey. It's like the Handmaid's Tale kind of scene. Like I just laid there while he took whatever he wanted to take that day. And hearing the word marital rape made me really think about that.
Wow. Something that I wanted to ask you if this was the same in your sect. Beatrice had mentioned that she was, I don't know if it was a rule or she was under the impression that men were supposed to pleasure the women or make sure that they were pleasured. Was that in your space at all? Was that a rule?
I mean, I think it was technically a rule. It's written in the marriage contract, like the man needs to satisfy his wife sexually,
Okay.
but there's no real follow up to that, and there's no instruction on how to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I know in my husband's case, he was told you should have about 45 minutes of foreplay before you enter the woman.
Uh-huh.
But he wasn't told like what constituted foreplay. So he was a very literal man, and he would put like a timer on and he would like stroke my arm for 45 minutes.
No, Sarah. Sarah. Stop. Okay.
He was just so like kind of in a way like so sweet and like such a rule follower. He was like, they said
Mm.
45 minutes.
The intention
And
was there,
it was
just
there.
missed the
It
mark.
was. Right. Like if you say pleasure a woman, but then there's no follow up and you've never seen a woman, like, it doesn't really
The
count.
dots don't connect. Right, because you had mentioned there was something on campus about female orgasm, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's a funny word. What does that mean?
Right. I was like, it probably means the same thing as like MTV, like things I'm not supposed to know about.
Right.
You know, there are so many. How would I even know what they were?
Yeah. Okay, so we need to get to the point of your story, and thank you for being so candid about all of this sex stuff. I think it's so important. When you finally decided, I don't feel safe here, you told him to get out of the house and you started the process of trying to get a divorce. Can you explain to people who aren't familiar how you actually get a divorce within your community?
Yes. So the divorce process within the Orthodox and Hasidic community is very stacked toward the male. The husband has the right to decide whether or not he grants a divorce to his wife. And that's a Jewish divorce, not a civil divorce, a Jewish one. It's important for women and men in the community to have a Jewish divorce because they cannot remarry another Jewish person without it. And if they do, then their children get shunned and they get excommunicated. So it's an important
Whoa.
document to have. And that's like the stakes are high, right? And so when I wanted to get divorced, I needed my husband's permission to get a divorce. And I knew that he could decide whether or not to give one to me. And also, divorce is viewed as a terrible thing to do, like in many religious cultures, as against what God wanted. And so I started making my rounds to the rabbis to get permission to pursue a divorce. And each rabbi like acted like it was the first time I'd ever made a complaint, and we're like, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Try this marriage counselor, etc. And I realized it wasn't getting anywhere. I could have made the rounds of rabbis for 10 years, and many women do. And they're told, like, oh, just wait, because no rabbi wants the responsibility of saying, I have given this couple permission to get divorced. And so eventually I got creative and I made threats. And that's how I got my divorce. But I threatened my husband's parents, and it was like subtly in a very sweet voice. I was like, I don't really want to have to tell anyone that he was abusive. And that worked. They told him to grant the divorce, but he did get to put a condition in the divorce document. I was just so grateful that he was going to let me go. And so when he asked me to sign something that said I pledged and promised that I would raise my kids Orthodox, the language of that document says, and if I were to deviate, custody of my children would be transferred to him.
Mm.
That means if I were to deviate from like not wearing a wig, long skirts, praying, being part of the Orthodox community, keeping kosher, keeping Shabbat, if I were to deviate, be gay, I would lose my kids. And I signed it because I was just so grateful to get out And I was like, you know what? I'm not losing my kids. And so I will do whatever I have to do. I'll wear the garb, I'll do the orthodoxy. It doesn't matter. I just can't be married to him, but I'll do that for them.
Yeah. And that's a really big sacrifice for you because I think mentally you were on your way out, but I'm sure you were just thinking one step at a time. I just
Yeah,
gotta get this thing handled first. And your kids were still really young, right?
they were 3 and 1, and I was 24.